Hello, my name is Matthew. I'm not a time banker. As a nomad, it's very difficult for me to join the time bank. But I count myself in the monetary reform camp. And for the last 6 years, I've been writing software to support communities working at the grassroots level to enable their own accounting systems and run their own community websites. And I've been looking at what's happening inside time banking. And as an outsider, I have observed over the years this conflict between the community weaver camp and the Our World camp. And I think now that I'm very happy to say the conflict seems to be coming back together and we're entering a time of cooperation. But looking at what's left behind in the conflict is very interesting. Because what we have now is the Our World software, which is ready to go, and it's got about half of all the time banks on it. And the Community Weaver software, Community Weaver 3, is coming up. I saw the demo yesterday, and I think it looks wonderful, and it's going to be great. In fact, if you had to choose between the two side by side, I would anticipate that Community Weaver 3 is going to be better than Our World on a point-by-point comparison. But the problem is, we now have two sets of software which are appealing to exactly the same demographic, right, which is 90%, maybe more, of all the time banks. And they're doing this with a very similar structure, a slightly different business model. And it's not really addressing everything that time banks might want to become. And it's not addressing some of the stray time banks. I'm thinking particularly about Dane County, which wants to do so many other things from within the context of the time bank. And both of the existing software packages are about mass hosting websites, which are all basically pretty similar, and probably hosting them on the same web server, which means it's difficult for a community to take control and ownership of its own software and continue developing it in a particular direction. There's a market theory that says this is actually a very good thing. You've got this marketplace, you've got all these customers, and the providers of goods and services in the marketplace have to go at each other's throats and slaughter each other, and then the most fit one, like in the theory of evolution, the best one will emerge triumphant, and they can have the monopoly to provide this service to the market. That works very well if you're producing widgets, but it doesn't work very well if you're providing infrastructure to end users. There are infrastructure wars happening financed by Silicon Valley throughout the tech sector, and it's very, very damaging for users who are not interested in fighting wars and choosing the best thing. They want integrated services at the infrastructure level. So I just want a quick diagram. It's not very technical, in my opinion. The anatomy of a typical time banks package. So matslats is the one I wrote right at the beginning, back in 2006, and never got used. And there's CES, which is really massive. It's bigger than Community Weaver and Our World put together. It's run out of South Africa. Time Talents, we know. Time Online was used by Time Banks UK. And Cyclops is another package that's more about banking. And all of these things, they run on basic standard open source platforms. So you can set up a web server with completely open source software, and most of the web runs like that. And then you have an application on top of that. And you get a coder and you invest and you specify and you write the application, and then you end up with one lump of code and you deliver that to the users. And the code will do all of these functions. And it's all very highly integrated. And so when the time bank comes along, it has to choose between one of these or another one, which is basically the same. So that's the monolithic architecture. That's how we compete with each other. We produce the best monolithic structure will win in the marketplace. And I've compiled a list of all the ones I can think of in English that are doing very similar kinds of things. Some may have currencies, some may not. These are all services about exchanging things between neighbours, but none of them have shared anything between them. They're all independent software stacks. They're owned by a different entity. They're trying to capture as much of the market as they can and build a marketplace with all the few users that they can scrabble together. And in my view, of course it's a market success, we see all the diversity, but to me it's just not working. And there's no sharing going on between these organizations who are actually trying to do pretty much the same thing. So what I've been doing for the last 6 years is this module. I want to tell you 10 seconds on modules. What we can do in the open source world is you have an open source platform that builds on that stack at the bottom. And it says, this is a content management system. Now you can build your own web application with open source modules. And that way you don't have one developer who writes everything and all the software and then has to maintain it until they die and then leaves the organization in chaos. What you have instead is a whole community of developers, and in the case of Drupal there are tens or hundreds of thousands of developers who take responsibility for units of code which work independently of each other very largely, or they have explicit dependencies, so we know if we change this then there may be repercussions over here. You have separation of functionality in the code. And the mutual credit module aims to do one thing very well and very configurably, which is accounting between members of the community. So you'll have an account in one of these content management platforms, and then you can, with the mutual credit module, you can trade. You log transactions with other members, and you could declare a currency, you could declare different kinds of forms, you could declare the balance limits, you could say if it's backed or if it's not backed. And so with the mutual credit module, each community can define its own rules around the currency and implement it and experiment separately and independently. And on top of the, with the mutual credit module, I then co-founded an organization called Community Forge, and we built a whole site made up of Drupal and Drupal modules, and we packaged them all together and we started giving them away in the same way that our world has been giving away websites to time banks. Community Forge has been giving away websites hosted to Let's groups, mostly French-speaking, in Europe. The same kind of business model, but with in that it's completely free and there's no business going on at all. But the difference with the Hamlets distribution and these monolithic stacks, which everyone else is using, is that you can take the Hamlets distribution, put it on your own web server, switch some modules off, get some more modules in place, and then build a website that suits your community's needs. And when it came to the Australians, is Simon still here?
No, he went.
Okay, so we needed to build a time bank site for the Australian government, and we started with Hamlets, and in a month we were able to deliver a website because all the components were already in place. And it was just a matter of configuring them. So this is an example of how using existing components, it can be cheaper and you can be more agile to deliver customized websites. So this is a comparison of how it works. There's a community accounting module. It's only got one developer, which is me, but all of the rest of this code is maintained and used by hundreds of other and thousands of other people and websites. Moving on, please. I'm not going to cover this, but we need to think further ahead in the future towards the next internet, which will be much more supportive of groups working together and tools in those groups. So the question is, if we're in a situation where we're now all using different platforms and it's not very efficient, but there's still a way that we can work together. And that involves making the platforms more interoperable. We need to be able to do transactions between time banks on our world and time banks on Community Weaver and time banks on Community Forge. And we have to work together closely and maybe share resources in order to allow that to happen. Another way we can cooperate is on a mobile phone app. If we just agree what the API is that allows a mobile phone app to talk to a time banking application, then we can all use the same mobile phone app. And finally, it would be really nice and interesting if we can have our offers and wants browsable across different platforms as well, and that requires some cooperation. I think that's the end. There's one more slide with my Twitter on.
Oh.
So please take note, and thank you very much.
It would really help us out if you subscribe, share, and comment. Thank you!